Have you ever wondered why one bag of coffee might cost you $14 and another bag of coffee might cost you $70? Or, you know, when you get tasting notes on the bag, who is the person who's deciding that this coffee tastes like pineapple and guava? And how does a roaster in South Korea and a coffee producer in Ethiopia, how can they find the perfect coffee match? The answer is Q graders, certified coffee tasters. They're kind of like the wine sommelier of the coffee industry, and they're the people who evaluate the quality of coffee beans. In 2025, though, there's going to be a major shakeup that is going to kind of change how coffee is graded, and it might reshape the entire industry and how we do things. So there's been a bit of confusion, there's been some controversy, and been a lot of hot takes along the way as well. Thankfully, we have Ben Bicknell here, our co-host, who is a Q grader and Q instructor himself, the first one in Australia. And he's going to break down all of it and how it works and what some of these changes might mean as we move forward with this new structure. So today on the pod, why and how green coffee is evaluated, what's changing, and what it means to the industry. And for the person also brewing at home or behind a bar in a cafe. I'm Rowan Cook. I make coffee on the internet.
And I'm Ben Bicknell. I judge people who make coffee in a competition. That's all.
And together we are
It's Just Coffee.
The coffee podcast for people who know it's never just coffee. Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick word from one of our sponsors, Apex Lab. Elevate your coffee experience with Apex Lab mineral concentrates. Apex Lab's precision-engineered formulas, including tonic, jam, and lilac, are designed to enhance the coffee's natural flavors. Not going to change it, it's just going to enhance it. It's going to bring out the vibrant acidity, the rich sweetness, or if you use lilac, it might bring out those delicate floral notes that you've been looking for. Trusted by world-class cafes and even barista champions, Apex Lab helps you unlock your coffee's full potential. Discover more at apexlab.com. Wait, where was that again, Sonam?
The internet.
Oh, okay. Thought I was going to say the website. Thanks. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors at Eco Barista. The reason I sound like this is because they got massages at our stand at Mice, and so I'm getting a massage while recording this message for you. They're the best sponsor of the pod that we could have had. They have the best eco products. This probably sounds really pornographic, but it's not. I'm just getting a massage. They have the best eco-friendly coffee products. They got coffee bags that you can design yourself. They got cups. They got iced coffee cups. They got everything you need. So make sure to support them because they support us. Head to ecobarista.com.au and get 15% off your first purchase when you sign up. Oh, mama, that's good.
Deep.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on today's pod, we're going to be breaking down Q graders, how we judge coffee, how they get value and get scored. I'm going to play the layman here as we do this because I obviously know about Q graders, but I don't know all the ins and outs of how it works. So you'll be able to kind of run us through that. And hopefully I can ask the questions of maybe the listeners that don't know as much as well. Because to me, a Q grader is just someone who looks at raw coffee beans, green beans, evaluates them, if they've got defects, if they're bad cherries in there or seeds in there, and then also cups the coffee and kind of gives it a score based on, you know, its attributes, what it tastes like and all those kind of things. So that's my basic understanding, but we'll dive into it a bit more and find out more. So you're a Q grader, Q instructor. So a Q grader being someone that grades the beans and an instructor that teaches other people how to become a Q grader. Is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
You evaluate raw green coffee. Can you just tell us, though, to start off, why is coffee evaluated in the first place?
So we want to evaluate coffee for a few different reasons. It's a value discovery mechanism. It's to help us to effectively communicate about coffee and especially during trade, so buying and selling. And then also it allows us to unpack all that coffee has to offer. So it allows us to break down all the different aspects and what we might enjoy.
So can we dive a little bit deeper into those? Because often I find with these kind of things, there's language and words that are used that to the outsider doesn't mean much. Value discovery. Can we start there? What is value discovery? like figuring out how much a coffee is worth or what it's offering?
Yeah, it does lead to that. I think that a good way of thinking about it is if we imagine this huge sea of coffee that's out there, commodity and commercial coffee, and specialty is only still a really small portion of all the coffee that's traded and produced around the world. And so we want to really discover which lots or particular parcels of that coffee are more valuable and have distinguishable kind of flavors and characteristics that we want to purchase. So we go, oh, that lot are more than just a generic coffee that could be replaced with any other coffee. They are kind of something special. There's something unique, and we want to lift those up and kind of go, this should be rewarded.
It's a way of people kind of finding like where are the most interesting or well-established kind of coffees around the world and being like, let us show that to the world. Let us tell them this is the special lot.
Yeah. And as I said,
or not a special lot.
Yeah, or not. It's like meh. You want to move it beyond the meh coffee into, wow, this is something that deserves more value on it, and we want to kind of elevate that up. And that's kind of a pretty critical cornerstone, I think, of like the specialty coffee movement as a whole, is that we want to say this is something unique that has great characteristics.
Yeah. So that makes sense. It's kind of like a way of certifying, like when people are getting coffee, they're like, yeah, I know this is going to be good or not, or it's going to, fulfill a certain role. Mm-hmm. But you talked about communication in trade. So when you're talking about communication in trade, are you talking like from the producer of the coffee, like the farm, through to the people buying it? And is it effective communication, in just describing what the coffee is going to be like?
Well, I think communication in specialty coffee is kind of for people working in the profession, communication happens all through the different roles. So whether you're a barista and you're communicating to a consumer, someone in the cafe about what they might taste, or whether you're a roaster talking to your cafe operators or importers, exporters, producers, we're all trying to explain to each other what the thing in the cup is that we have. The more effective that communication is at connecting with the audience or the need, the better for all of us, right? It's more efficient, it's more impactful, it's more interesting to engage with. If someone tries to communicate to you and you really are not picking up what they're putting down, it's just not going to be enjoyable. And for trade, that's especially important because mismatches, beyond that perfect match of like, hey, Rowan, I want you to send me a coffee that has bright acidity and is full of fruit character and a lighter body. If we don't have good communication, aren't speaking the same language, you're probably going to send me the wrong products. You might grow the wrong products, and then suddenly you're wasting all your money and time.
So what I'm getting is it's not only just like this is a good coffee and we've ranked it and it's like great. It's also about the way it's communicated to make sure you get the coffee that you want. And as we know, coffee is consumed differently all around the world. So that would be really important when you're looking for very specific things.
Yeah, definitely.
How was it done? Do you know how it was done beforehand? So Q grading has been around for 20 years or something like that?
Yep.
Like beforehand, how were people kind of communicating what coffee they wanted? Or did people not care about coffee in the same way then, that it was like, you get it, you roast it dark and it tastes like coffee?
Yeah. Well, it was a real challenge, which is kind of the I guess the catalyst for why the Specialty Coffee Association of America at that point, now the SCA, generated a cupping form and a protocol, was because if I was a roaster in the UK and traveled to Tanzania to buy some coffee, I could turn up there and the coffee preparation, this is pre-2000, right, as context, the coffee preparation for tasting it could be completely different. They could have roasted it really dark. They could have prepared it as a particular way. And then the language that they could be using to tell you about what coffees are on the table could be just completely different. And so navigating through that to go, well, I know what I need and they're telling me different things. How do we find the connection point? It was really different. And so there was a lot of mismatches.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. Let's dive into how it's done. How do you evaluate coffee? Is it just like you brew it, drink it, that's tasty? Like, what are the levels that we're breaking down here?
Yeah, you don't just pick up your cup of coffee, sip it and go, oh, that's a XYZ point score, right? We do want it to be a bit more formalized. So it's not what I or you would do every day when you pick up your first cup of coffee in the morning, right? It's a more structured, formal process The benefit, though, is that the language and the way of thinking about it can be useful for anyone. So we kind of started this conversation talking about Q graders, but realistically, this format and way of talking about coffee is valuable whether you're behind the bar or you're making coffee at home, because it provides you like a framework for navigating it. But to kind of come back to how do you evaluate it, the first thing that we would do professionally is start actually with the green coffee itself, the raw beans, unroasted. And we would look at that in a 350 gram sample, and we would sort out any defects or anomalies in there, categorize them. There's a global standard for those defects. And the green coffee, kind of whether it's specialty or not, will depend on the number and significance of the different defects in that sample. So we start with just the raw product before it's even been roasted.
Right. And so that would be defects. We don't need to dive into it too much, but that would just basically be the quality of the farming, how it's sorted. Is that kind of what you'd be looking at? That's what the defects identify?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, again, we go back to communication. Defects can be, in the green beans, are really valuable pointers towards what you might experience in the cup, and therefore also what can be addressed at the farm level and at the mill level. So yeah, there might be defects that are due to agronomy or kind of growing conditions, and then some defects that might be more about processing. So that's happening at the mill. Like if it's broken or chipped or cut, that's kind of because the mill isn't set up correctly.
That's cool. So you're kind of saying that, like, not only is it adding value for like the person buying it to be like, I know what I'm getting, but maybe the farmer can take it and be like, oh, we need to improve this part of our process to get a better quality.
Yeah. Again, I always love to think about tasting and evaluating coffee as a feedback tool, right? As a communication method. So you are kind of, imagine you have to debrief this with the person that's selling it to you. Is like, this is what I've found, that you have that responsibility to effectively communicate. And the green coffee can really add to that conversation.
Right. And then so you've evaluated the green coffee, the raw product. What comes next?
So then we follow a industry standard protocol for cupping or coffee tasting. And, most people have probably heard about what cupping is. It's just a standardized way of preparing the coffee and then assessing and tasting the coffee, so that, again, we have this level playing field, that we're using a similar ratio of coffee to water. It's 55 grams to the litre is kind of the ratio, which, depending on the size of your cupping bowl, you can kind of work out how much coffee to water you need. Standard contact time, standard way of kind of grinding and then breaking the coffee crust. So a cupping is, as you probably all know, is coffee plus water in, steep it. It's really bare bones, right? Because what we're trying to do here is assess the raw product. We're not trying to assess your barista technique or extraction technique or roasting. And so we do this as a cupping, and we then taste the coffee. You've probably seen those really obnoxious kind of videos or things of like, people just slurping away. But essentially we're tasting a range of samples from each lot of coffee, and to assess its uniformity and all of the different attributes that are in the cup. Okay,
now I can only talk as the person that you're saying. We're not judging your barista skills in that, but just so I understand it for cupping. So the coffee is roasted for that sample for the cupping.
Correct.
How do you standardize that roasting?
Cupping is generally a lighter roast profile because, again, we don't want to taste like those more developed roast characteristics. That's not really feedback about the raw product, right? And so there is a standardized measurement for that. It kind of uses it gives a bit of a framework for roast time. So it should be between 8 and 12 minutes, and that we're looking at to go past kind of first crack by a certain amount of time. So that's that first expansion of the coffee bean during roasting. And there is a color reference that's provided in the protocols, so that you can kind of you can utilize tools that will measure the color of your roast, and you want to be within a window of that.
Right. Okay. So you've cupped it, you've slurped it, you've looked like an idiot slurping away.
Yep.
How do you then judge the coffee?
Yeah. So this is then when we start coming to the cupping form that we utilize. So for the past 20 years or so. This has been the SCA's, or the Specialty Coffee Association's, well, I guess now being referred to as the 2004 cupping form, because that's when it was established. And so this form basically breaks down all of the attributes of the coffee and allows you to rate both the quality of that, of each of those attributes, and take down some descriptive notes about how you unpack what that kind of character was.
Right. And then just so I understand, there's been we've talked about it, there's going to be a change.
Yep.
That was CQI, now SCA?
Yeah, there's a lot of acronyms in coffee, aren't there? So,
But you just said as well the form is the SCA 2004 form.
Correct, yeah.
Not CQI?
So maybe we take a little segue here to break down acronyms. So there's the Coffee Quality Institute, which is CQI. They're an international non-profit. They're actually a charitable education trust, which basically just means they're registered to do more development work in an education format. And they're actually a charity, which is pretty interesting. And then there's the Specialty Coffee Association. So they're a trade membership association, also non-for-profit. But their focus is really about trade membership and kind of working for the trade. So a little bit of a different focus there. And CQI has been historically the manager and established the Q grader program, and therefore certified Q graders, the cuppers. But that's what's changing. And we'll dive into that a little bit later. But the form that was used by Q graders was the SCA's 2004 cupping form.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the clarity on that and a little understanding. Do we want to break down that form a bit more?
Yeah, let's do it. Yep. And maybe we can use some little screenshots here.
Producer Liam is going to whip something up right on the screen.
But yeah, we can start off. Basically, the coffee is broken down into kind of a sequence of different attributes that we can say some might be really great quality and some might be lower quality. So first off, we start with fragrance and aroma. And fragrance is talking about the dry coffee grinds, right? So before you put any water on it, you're smelling the dry grinds to give you an indication of what might be coming. And then the aroma is when you hit it with the water and it's kind of steeping in there, a lot of the volatile aromatics are coming off. So we've got a quality score there, and some descriptive notes for what are we smelling in the
Smelling dry coffee, smelling wet coffee.
Perfect. Got it. And then we move on to tasting it. Once we've steeped the coffee, so the coffee steeps for 4 minutes, we break the crust, so clear the coffee grinds off the top of it, generally waiting until about 10 or 11 minutes, and we're starting to taste our coffee. And the first thing that pops out is going to be flavor. Pretty self-explanatory, right? As an attribute, we've got flavor there is like descriptives like it might be blueberry or citrus, or it might be something like rubber or smoke, right? So could be there's some descriptors there that are considered lower or higher quality, and they could be more or less complex, right? So we might just say, no, it kind of tastes like chocolate, or kind of tastes like citrus, or you might be like, wow, this tastes exactly like blood orange.
Yeah, this is yuzu.
Exactly. If anyone's tasted actual yuzu, it's so hard to find those things.
Yeah.
So we've got our flavors that we're describing, and they will have a quality score. And then we have aftertaste, which is the kind of lingering on your palate flavor experience that's there. So could be short, could be long. There's nothing to say that one or the other is better, but what is the quality of that experience? We've got acidity, which is the brightness of the coffee. So you might have descriptions like it's sour or sharp, would be maybe negative descriptives, like poor quality. And then you might have bright and tangy and zesty, kind of other examples.
Ooh, zesty. He's a zesty boy.
Popping out there. So we've got the acidity. You normally find that on the back sides of your palate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then we move on to body. So this is the weight and the texture of your coffee. So how heavy or light it is in the cup. We've got balance, which is kind of how all of those aspects play together, right? Are they well connected, or there's really great quality acidity, but it's kind of sitting out over here and doesn't mesh with the other attributes.
Does body tap into, because one thing that didn't feel like was listed there is like texture. Is that under body, that kind of feeling in the mouth? Because that's a big one, I feel like, with coffee.
Yeah, body generally will kind of accommodate kind of texture, like mouthfeel. that tactile element of, is it oily or creamy or thin or watery? Some of these kinds of descriptors.
Now, in a lot of the barista comps, one of the big things that I feel like they touch on now is sweetness. Is that something that's evaluated on the score sheet?
It is. And, this is a pretty interesting thing and is always a good conversation in the Q grader courses is why is sweetness assessed this way? And sweetness in the 2004 form is just a checkbox of yes or no. Like there is sweetness or there is no sweetness. And that's because, again, specialty coffee is like this really small part of all coffee traded. And the threshold for us to say, okay, this is entering in specialty is there a minimum level of sweetness in the cup, right? So yes or no. We're not kind of looking for, is it really, really sweet or is it less sweet? Okay, so there's sweetness and a couple of other little check boxes that are included in there are uniformity. So in a cupping, you actually have 5 cups of the same coffee. Because if you just cup one, it might be amazing and really delicious, and the next one's just full of defects and tastes terrible. We need to know like how uniform is the sample. And so there's a little checkbox for each of those 5 cups. And then there's also clean cup, which is talking specifically about defects. So you can have non-uniform, right? So inconsistent sample, but it's not because of a defect. It's not because it's like bad and a real problem. It just maybe is a little flatter or this one's actually a bit more fruity or whatever it is. So they're ununiform, but then a defect is talking very specifically about some problems that are going to occur. And we could kind of talk about those, but it might be a rabbit hole. But you've got things like, is it phenolic or moldy or...
Here, moldy is often not good. Is that correct to say?
Yeah.
As a non-professional over here, moldy, no good, I would say.
I'm a fan of cheese, but not in my coffee,
right.
Maybe.
I don't know. Where is it? There's some Scandinavian countries where they put some cheese in their coffee.
Really?
Yeah, they put it's almost like halloumi, but without salt. It's like a cheese curd in brewed coffee and it like soaks it up. I think it was in like colder countries for like extra fat and energy.
I mean, look, I can kind of see that. Well, look, we might have to do a coffee break taste.
So moldy, you said moldy coffee, phenolic, was that what's that?
Yeah, it's phenolic is kind of a particular defect where it tastes almost like Band-Aids or iodine.
You get that in wine too.
Yeah.
The old Band-Aid cup.
Mm-hmm. It's not pleasant. It's not good. So we're kind of checking out defects that can kind of happen there.
Wait, question.
Yes.
Big one that I've had tasting a lot of coffees is, and I think is it Burundi maybe I've had it? I feel like I've had something that we call a potato cup where the coffee tastes like potato.
Yeah.
What's that?
If you haven't had this before, you're very lucky.
Yeah.
But the potato defect is a unique defect. It actually only occurs generally in 3 countries. So Burundi, Rwanda, and the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? So this really small group of countries landlocked in East Africa, and it's brought on by a little bug that burrows in. There's a little bit of debate about exactly what's happening here, but whether it brings a bacteria in. And in the cup, it tastes literally like raw potatoes.
Yeah. It tastes awful. It's terrible.
It's pretty bad.
I thought it might be more common in Ireland, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, their coffee production is pretty low.
Potatoes.
I apologize for my co-host.
Irish people know they love potatoes. That's all they talk about all day. Okay, so you look for that. So defects.
Yep. Then you've got one last score box there, which is your overall experience. And this is kind of the zoomed out experience from start to finish. You're tasting this coffee hot, warm, and cold to kind of see how it develops. And so you're saying, what was my overall quality experience of this?
Okay. And then that's scored? Is there a number-based system on this? How does that work?
Yeah. So this form breaks it down into all of those, and we're scoring each attribute between 6 and 10 points. Okay. Yes, I know. 6 is a weird place to start.
I'm giving, for those not watching my face, I'm giving him a weird looking thing because if you judge it out of 10, you would normally assume that means 1 to 10, not 6 to 10.
That's a fair point.
I wish people judged me on that. If I could be minimum 6, that would be
9
fantastic.
to 10, how effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the reason that the form starts at 6 is that this is, again, on a global perspective of all coffee, is that if there's a lot of coffee out there that would be lower quality, this isn't the right form or the right tool to use for assessing those coffees. So,
so already you're starting at a point where this is meant to be a high level of coffee. How do they determine which ones go into this Q grading program that don't then?
Well, the beauty of the approach for the form is that you don't need to kind of gatekeep whether it's the right coffee or not. It's really just if it cups below this score, then it's not going to be useful to use this form.
Okay.
Right. But you should be able to kind of assess any coffee coming through on it.
Okay, cool. Sorry. Back to the score.
That's okay. It's from 0 to 6.
6 to 10.
Yeah. It's it's from 0 to 10, and the score sheet starts at 6.
And if it's below that, throw it in the bin. No one cares.
If it's probably a commodity coffee.
Yeah.
Right? And as a quick reference, this is out of a 100-point scale. So it will give you a score when you add all of this up out of 100 points. And historically, for the last kind of couple of decades, the definition of specialty has said that it needs to score 80 points or above on this scale in order to qualify as a specialty coffee, right? And if you're scoring like 7s across the board of this form, you actually end up with a 79-point coffee. So specialty is actually like quite good quality. It's between kind of 7.25 and above.
And I've always been ranked as a 7, so it's above that.
You're in the intriguing land that you could be specialty, but not quite.
Okay, so all of those things you talked about, acidity, blah, 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 you give them a score from 6 to 10, add it all up, and that lands you at the 100.
Yep.
And then above specialty is 80, and above like 85 is excellent kind of thing. And then some of these like competition coffees we're seeing, they're up in like the 90s, right? Like,
yeah. Yep.
What's the cupping or Q grading experience that you've had where you're like, what's the one that stands out where you're blown away?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Burundi because I actually had a Q grading kind of calibration actually with other Q instructors. So there was a little bit of pressure because we were being assessed as to what our quality assessment was in a group and our calibration. And we had a Burundi on the table and I was just like, acidity was beautiful, really, really high acidity, but beautifully balanced and had all of these complex kind of stone fruit and peach and locust and yellow fruit flavors in it. And I was like, this is it ended up coming out as like a 91 or a 92-point coffee. And the rest of the group were definitely a little bit lower, but I was just like, no, this is super high quality.
Is that why they were giving you that specific coffee? Was there a reason there where they're like, we want to make sure that these guys are giving this the score that it should be getting? Was that the point, or was it random?
No, well, in the Q course, and the same with us as instructors, is that we want to kind of see the ability for people to gauge, and to assess coffees at all different quality levels, so that the really high qualities, are you able to recognize those, and the really low subspecialty, you need to recognize that.
Okay, cool. So I've just covered off how Q grading works and the kind of processes needed to get there. You end up with a score, you end up with a way of communicating what this coffee is like and what to expect in the cup. Is that kind of it?
Yeah. I think if you were to sum it up, the quality evaluation of coffee, you've got a green coffee, quality evaluation for the raw product, then you cup it, you come out with scores and qualities on all the attributes that add up to a total score and a whole heap of descriptors around each of those. So there's notes on what that actually tastes like.
Perfect. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about what a Q grader is or how you become a Q grader. But before that, Emma Chamberlain, aware?
Yes.
Yep. Emma Chamberlain, big online personality, has her own coffee company, Chamberlain Coffee. I would say she positions herself in more of like the every person, of like, just enjoy the coffee that you love. She sells matcha packets. She's got all that kind of stuff. But she actually did a video describing her take on a Q grader. I'd love to play that for you here and get your feelings as a Q grader.
All right.
Today we're going to be discussing flavor notes. There are people called Q graders. They're trained to taste these flavor notes that an annoying person you went on a date with pretends to have. They smell the living fuck out of a cup of coffee. Professionals will taste little sips of an espresso and let it coat their tongue, and they'll close their eyes and they'll breathe in and out and they'll dig into the back archive of their brain, and then they're like, it's leather. They've never even eaten leather before.
Okay, now just from us chatting Now, I'm going to pull up a few things that I have issues with. Number one, they sip espresso. No, they don't. I mean, they might in other parts of their life, but as a Q grader, you don't sip espresso.
No,
you're cupping the coffee. Number two, she's like, they go into a deep part of archive in their brain and say that it tastes like leather, like Ratatouille, like, you know, that moment in Ratatouille where the guy gets taken back to his childhood. But it sounds like you're saying that, no, we're trying to standardize what the tasting notes and what we're talking about are. So it's everyone has a similar language and we can all kind of put it out there. So that's my takeaways. What's your feeling on that video?
Yeah, and hilariously, leather is one of the standardized flavor notes.
I do eat a lot of leather.
I mean, you know, well, it's interesting because so much of what we describe as flavor is actually coming from our aroma perception. Like around 80% of that is coming from aroma. So we all know what leather smells like when you kind of have like new leather shoes or a belt or something like that. Yeah, look, I mean, I like that she's kind of playing with this and poking a little bit of fun at it, because I think as coffee professionals, we do need to laugh at ourselves a little bit more. We can kind of, you know, it is just coffee, right?
Yeah.
We need to not take ourselves too seriously. And I think, you know, she is recognizing though that Q graders do actually have this capability to kind of taste something, have that sensory experience and connect it with language that can be used. And that's kind of a key part that we can all train and be developed in. So that's a pretty interesting thing. I think as well that we need to think about like, how do we communicate that? You know, this definitely makes me think of how do we translate that professional, detailed, trained experience to something that can be applied out there in the world for coffee drinkers. You know, we might be really dialed in and start tasting and we're spending like an hour with a particular coffee. The consumer's not doing that. They're not tasting it hot to warm to cool and cupping it and breaking it down on a form. So how do we take the experience but then translate it to something that people on your regular date, as she's saying, can actually relate to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on your regular date, I think she described it as the annoying person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that you? Are you the annoying person?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. No, and I think it's important even for like the person brewing the coffee at home, because as someone who sells coffee, one of the interesting things I find, we create like is our signature blend, which is great with milk, chocolatey. It's a Brazil, really nice coffee for like when you just want a beautiful milk-based coffee or a classic coffee tasting coffee, let's say.
Yeah.
But then we have other more specialty kind of, well, it's all specialty, but more specialty in the way of the flavor profiles that you're looking at. They're a bit brighter. There's more fruit. There's more this. But then some people, you'll get complaints where it's like, this coffee is off. It's sour. It's whatever. And they don't understand their own flavor preferences and what they like. So I think everyone being armed with how to talk about coffee so they can talk about their preferences is always a really helpful thing, especially when communicating with roasters or whoever you're buying it from.
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, that having that common language of coffee, of kind of coffee quality, of attributes, and trying to thread that all the way through the supply chain means that we've kind of got coffee that can be found or created by producers, you know, can be grown, and that can kind of hit the mark all the way down through to the consumer.
Cool. So let's take a step back. We've talked about how it's done and everything, but who are the people that are actually doing this? Who are Q graders? How do you become one? Why do you become one? Why are you one?
Just for the pain and suffering. No, I think like the Q grader course, and again, we caveat this with there are changes coming, but historically what's been happening with the Q grader course, which is over 20 years old, is that it's actually a 6-day intensive course. It's often referred to, as you mentioned in the intro here, about it's like the sommelier course of coffee, right? So it's a 6-day course that evaluates, it trains people, but it also verifies their sensory capabilities and their ability to utilize that cupping form to effectively capture and communicate that sensory experience in a calibrated manner, right? So, if someone just off the street uses the form without any training and without any kind of preparation, the number there that they end up with may not be calibrated on kind of to a standard or to like an agreed upon kind of level. And that's the key thing with Q graders is they've got the capability and they're also calibrated with the scoring so that they can use that to communicate with others. So it's a 6-day course, goes through all kinds of different sensory skill tests and then a lot of cupping. There's 19, 20 different kind of assessment modules that they've got to pass to get it. It's really rigorous.
Jeez, that's intense. 6 days.
Yeah, 6 days.
How much, and do you prep for it? Like, do you have to study like for an exam? You're just sitting there slurping coffees. Like, how do you prepare for that?
There are some people who put a huge amount of preparation into it because it is really intensive. So they could be training and preparing for it over a year, and then there's others who dive in and kind of go straight into the deep end with it. And sometimes they have surprisingly good results. And then others, there's a lot of learning and challenge to do.
How do you learn the calibration though? Like that feels like the tricky part. I feel like I could sit down and be like, oh, that one's quite acidic, but then I'm like, am I giving that a 6 or a 7? I don't really know.
Yeah. And I think this is the real value of like tasting coffee or cupping coffee in particular with others and discussing it with like your peers and with others who do it a lot. Because the more you share that experience, you build up your own sensory language, right? So you'll be tasting it and you'll be like, what is that thing that I'm experiencing? And someone else will say, oh, that's, hazelnuts. And you're like, yes.
Then it locks in your brain.
And then you're like tasting and locking it in. Yep. And you've got that connection. But also it helps you start going like, oh, I understand why Rowan kind of gave that a better score or why he thought that was a high quality of coffee. And you use that to keep iteratively informing your quality.
Also, I think it's a great tip for anyone that's a coffee lover out there who's trying to introduce someone to the coffee world. Comparison is always the easiest way to communicate. Like I see so many people who go out, buy some expensive coffee, whatever it is, and they're like to a friend who doesn't really get coffee, oh my God, this is blueberries and whatever, and you're going to love it. It's incredible. Try this coffee. And they sip it. And in that single moment where there's no comparison, they go, oh yeah, I guess kind of. It tastes like coffee. When you go, here are 3 coffees laid out for you.
Yep.
Try this one, then this one, then this one. That's when people can understand the differences that you're talking about. Without comparison, you're lost.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like you're relying on people to cast their memory back to that last coffee they had and what did I think about that and taste it? And, they might not have even been like mentally interacting with it deeply.
Okay, so Q graders, they train for it, they slurp coffees, they calibrate their tasting. And is that all Q graders do? So Q graders are just going to judge the coffee? Is that their whole role? Why does anyone want to become a Q grader then?
Yeah, well, I think people generally want to become a Q grader for one of 3 reasons. You either want it just for skill development. So you're attending the course to kind of learn the sensory skills, learn the ability to utilize the cupping form for your own development. Right? Or
no, I'm just realizing how stupid I am. I'm just thinking it's like people who are trained and do it to evaluate the coffee. But of course, like you do it for your training and for different skill sets. So would some people that become Q graders not even grade people's coffees?
Yeah. I've had a lot of like people who are baristas, like passionate head baristas who come along to the course because they want to build their language around their sensory skills and the ability to taste coffee, maybe not in that format in their day-to-day, but you can still use the framework and the language to go and taste any coffee and communicate.
Oh, cool. It's just like a certification. If you're like, hey, I got my cert 3 and whatever. It's like, oh, I'm a Q grader. So you know that I know these certain things.
Not like whatever. But yeah, it's basically
I don't know. I'm throwing it out as a
just
whatever.
Any old cert 3.
I mean, Q graders, fine. But it's the real douches are the ones that also become Q instructors, I think it's called. That's where it really starts going down.
Those people. Whew. But I think they come along for skill development. They also might need it specifically for their job. So if they are specifically buying or selling coffee, a green coffee, then having that ability to evaluate that raw product is really critical. Or they might want it for career progression. So if you look around on a lot of the jobs that are going at maybe a roastery or even sometimes in a cafe, they might say Q grader licensing or certification preferred. And so it can be a real opportunity for people to say, I achieved this. I've proven that I'm dedicated and that I have these capabilities. Hire me for this position.
Right. So let me ask you this. If you're a barista, because I know when I was working as a barista, I was like, how can I better myself and go further? Would you recommend this as something to do for just like a barista, or is there something else that you'd recommend?
I think that it can be a really great pathway for that development, both in your own skills, as I said, but also it does signal to people that it's kind of worthwhile. So it can be great, but there are other maybe less intensive than 6-day courses ways to progress.
Like if you were going to compete in competitions, this would be huge, because it sounds like a similar way of how it is the scores that you do, like with acidity and that, is that similar to like a score sheet at the World Barista Championships?
Yeah, the score sheet is quite different because we're assessing, like at the World Barista Championships, we would be assessing kind of espresso extractions and milk. So the balance and characteristics we're looking for is a little bit different, but the language and the kind of calibration to what we mean with language and intensities and qualities is all the same. So whether you're talking acidity in filter coffee, in cupping, or in espresso, you're still talking about the same sensory experience.
Yeah. So you wouldn't when you're doing Q graders, because now it's the fashionable thing that when you're describing how a coffee tastes, you just want to throw in like cool cultural things. You're like, oh my God, this coffee is such a strawberry starburst. You're not doing that in the Q graders.
No. I mean, it's kind of an interesting space, right? Because like in some ways, saying strawberry starburst to you and I, if we've had strawberry starburst, we're like, oh, wow, yeah. I get that.
It's grape hubba bubba.
Yeah. It's like fun. It's kind of accessible. But if you're then talking to someone in Nicaragua about, well, maybe strawberry starburst is pretty popular in Nicaragua. I don't know. But, if you're trying to use that as a descriptor to go across cultures.
Coffee tastes like Vegemite. And exactly. Nicaraguan might be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. It doesn't translate. And so it's ineffective communication.
All right. So as of the 1st of October, 2025, this is all changing. The Q grading program is going to leave CQI, Coffee Quality Institute, and go to the Specialty Coffee Association, SCA.
Correct.
What is changing in the program? What does this mean? There's been a lot of confusion out there. Can you help kind of explain what you know so far?
Yeah, let's break it down. So as you said, it's a big change, right? And there's a few different aspects to it, but essentially CQI established the Q Grader program, and they've made an agreement with the SCA to transition kind of management of it to the SCA. It's technically, I believe, a licensing deal for 10 years. And SCA is paying CQI some licensing money, which they are going to utilize for their development work, as well as some other aspects to the deal. But essentially, the management is going to the SCA, and as part of that, they are recreating the Q Grader course. We don't know exactly what that looks like at the time of this recording because they haven't released it yet. But it is going to be around coffee quality or coffee evaluation is the general kind of space and remit that it's going to be. And it will still be called the Q Grader course, but we don't really know too much about that at this point. And of course, they're going to open up the program in terms of who the educators are and integrate that into their AST kind of program. But one of the biggest changes is that the movement from the 2004 cupping form, which we've kind of just explained about the scoring and the attributes, to the SCA's newly updated Coffee Value Assessment or CVA form and protocol. So that's going to be a really big change. And the implementation of it in the Q Grader program also has some kind of ripple-on effects for how people are being trained in evaluating coffee.
Okay. I have no idea what any of that means or the changes. How are we changing how it's being evaluated then?
Yes.
So it's not a score anymore. It's not the sheets. You wrote down, should I read out this definition that you wrote down?
Sure. This is the new Specialty Coffee Association definition for what is specialty coffee.
Specialty coffee is defined by the Specialty Coffee Association as a coffee or coffee experience that is recognized for its distinctive attributes, resulting in a higher value within the marketplace. Okay, it's defined as a coffee or coffee experience. What the hell is a coffee experience? Like going to a cafe and someone doing a dance before they pour the coffee? Like what?
That's definitely an experience. It's somewhat related to coffee. Yep. So I think there's a nod here to the consumer experience of this definition, right? Is like, it's not just about the cup. It's also about when you walk in and have a specialty coffee experience. Honestly, if you talk with most consumers and you say, what is specialty coffee? They'll be like, oh, it's like, exposed brickwork, low wattage globes, a shiny espresso machine and Tolix stools, tick, 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 tick. And there's someone with a beard and tattoos, which is an unfortunate categorization here. But I think that's what they're talking about there.
So there's one of the things that's kind of popped out in my research is it's a shift from what is quality to what is valuable. Is that right?
Yeah.
I still don't understand how they're judging the coffee, right? So before green coffee, what's the quality of it? How does it taste? Number. That's a good coffee. So the way that coffee is being judged is completely changing. What is the difference between the old way in which it was judged and the new way in which it's being judged?
Yeah. So there are some similarities, but there's some differences as well. The key thing is that the previous protocol with the 2004 cupping form defined specialty coffee as something that had a limited number of defects in the green sample, as we talked about. That's staying the same for the time being. But then on that cupping form, it needed to score 80 points and above. With the new coffee value assessment, they're breaking down the assessment or the evaluation of a coffee into different components. And the scoring component, there is still a scoring component, but it is no longer linked with kind of that 80-point threshold. It's using what's referred to as a hedonic scale, which is 0 to 9 points and is more about a preference or perception of how much you like that or not, right? And so the resulting point is that we don't come out with a score that's based around that 80-point threshold. And if, as you read out on the description, that 80-point threshold is no longer part of the definition of specialty coffee.
So what is defined as specialty coffee now?
It is a coffee or coffee experience that has distinguishable attributes that is valued by the market.
But how do they then tick whether that has happened or not?
So to explain that, I think that you need to really come back to how the form is structured. And up the top of the form is one line that says purpose. And that's the critical defining piece in this process is what is the purpose for evaluating at that moment? So for example, you've got golden brown coffee. You might be saying, I want to get a really interesting new coffee to feature as a single origin. I want something with lots of fruit. I want like heavy body, low acidity, long aftertaste. And I want to have kind of really aromatic, lots of florals in there. Okay, so you describe that, and our purpose is to find you that coffee. So we're going to have the CVA in front of us, and we're going to cup coffees. Now, if there is a light-bodied, kind of citrusy coffee that has no fruit, even if you really enjoy it, it would score low on that because it doesn't hit the mark of the purpose for this evaluation.
Right. So I haven't understood. So is the way that the reason we're evaluating changing as well? Was beforehand it was like we're evaluating green coffee to give it a score to be like, look at this. Now it's being done to find coffee. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's much more focused around the fit for your use. Right. And you're scoring it based on how accurately it fits your purpose. So how valuable that coffee is for you, for what you need it for. And I think the overarching philosophy on this was to try and open up the definition of what is specialty coffee, what can it be, and who gets to decide that. There have been struggles in the past about people going, oh, this huge, and particularly with fermentation, growing and the fruit kind of character, one person's really amazing, funky, like high fruit intensity coffee is another person's defective, low quality, over fermented. And the idea here was to open that up and say, well, if the market or a particular audience really values this particular thing, so parts of the world will really love this style of coffee and another one doesn't, then they can value it differently, and that can work rather than a a more central aligned agreement or definition of this is quality and outside of this is not quality.
I mean,
with the Walmart app, you can squeeze in those final days of summer and nail that back-to-school shopping list. So keep working on that tan and let Walmart Express Delivery handle the rest. Chromebooks, Clorox wipes, Sharpies, glue sticks, pens, pencils, and more. All delivered in as fast as an hour. So pour yourself another iced tea. Summer's not over. Last-minute back-to-school supplies delivered fast. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new. Subject to availability. Fees and restrictions apply.
Looking at that kind of makes sense. I'm kind of like, okay, that the world is different. We all have different preferences. There is an idea of like value to one person is different to another. I just feel like it's really hard to implement or find out. It feels like there's going to be a lot of like lost in translation moments.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge that a lot of people are trying to wrestle with, right? Is like there's some good thinking and some good, like a lot of great research that's gone behind this. And some, I think changes can be good, progress can be good. But I think the implementation, especially in that trade process of how coffee is valued and priced is a little bit of a challenge that people are still trying to understand. How do we use this system? I mean, this change is being, promoted and rolled out. The SCA has said this is the new standard, the new protocol for assessing coffee. I still think that the 2004 cupping form has a lot of history and it's utilized by a lot of people. So it's probably still the standard around the world, but there's these two conversations happening now about how we evaluate.
Okay, so Q grading completely changing. What do you think the coffee community is most worried about?
I think the coffee community is most concerned about how they can use this new format to assess coffee when our mindset has always been about quality and shifting it to value, and then using that new language, I guess, and the new scoring mechanism to go out and find coffees effectively.
Right. And what do you think? Is there something people are excited about? Are there people that are thinking this change is great?
Yeah, there's a lot of proponents for the system. I think people find aspects of it really kind of beneficial and valuable. I do think that there's going to be some very interesting ways this can be used from a consumer-facing point of view. So the scoring and the quality side is very adaptable from the world of sensory science into like consumer engagement. So it's just, do you like it or not? How much do you like it or not? It's not some esoteric like 0 to 10, but it starts at 6, goes to 10 kind of range. And so there's some real value in that. And I also particularly really like the formalization of one aspect of the CVA, which is called the extrinsic assessment. It's kind of a weird word, but it's essentially the stuff outside of the cup of coffee that still is attached or related to it. So, for example, that a cup of coffee comes from Panama has some value to some people versus maybe kind of saying a different country. If you are a roastery that is all about organic coffee, the fact that this coffee is certified organic has value to you.
Okay, so those certifications are coming into this value base as well, based on organic and like fair trade, whatever, like different certifications and sustainability, I guess.
Yeah, it's any of those attributes that are outside, like how does this coffee taste, right? What's the physical element of it? It's any of those things that are attached to the coffee that influence our perception of whether it's valuable or not. And we always did this, right?
Yeah.
But it was kind of anecdotal.
Yeah.
And you had to rely on people to kind of think about like, oh yeah, I've got to remember to tell them that it's like, this is from a women's producer cooperative.
Yeah. I think those things are important. I think that's great if those kind of things can like be brought into the assessment a bit more.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that's how we're going to grow those producing countries and those areas or farms by acknowledging those differences beyond like what is in the cup, So I think that's cool. I spoke to a friend of the show, Simon Gothrin. He had a few concerns. He sent me some voice notes. I'm going to read out a few. I am paraphrasing here, so don't quote me on these. Also, if he messages back and says he doesn't want his name said, we'll have a nice little beep in there so no one will know who we're talking about. But that's all great. Anonymous coffee expert. So first of all, he loved the idea of refreshing. He's like, that makes sense. We need to refresh. Things have changed in 20 years. We need to look at different ways of assessing things, like talking about more sweetness or different characteristics that we're now analyzing. He didn't like that the new score sheet for that numerical part that you were talking about, that it doesn't have half or quarter points, because he talks about like if you're judging on a scale of like, 9 points, he's like, there are so many minimal differences that full numbers don't quite hit it. If you have a coffee that say you want to go around an 8, and you're like, oh, but it's that little bit better than an 8. It's got a few more things that really make it stand out from this coffee over here that's an 8. Then what do? Just rank it a 9? Well, that's perfection. I can't rank it a 9. Where's the balance and the ability to have those kind of micro adjustments in what we're looking at? Also, it'll mean that a lot of coffees are going to sit at like an 8, but there's vast differences between those 8s. And so there's not enough wiggle room to kind of talk about the micro differences within the coffee. And we know when we're talking about specialty coffee that it sometimes is that 0.2%, 0.3% difference that really like elevates it to the next level kind of thing. So that was one thing you talked about.
I'll interrupt then.
Oh, please.
I'll give you a little bit of context on that. I think that this is going to be interesting as we actually start to apply this and people get more experience in utilizing that scoring framework, because it goes back to that idea of the purpose, really that kind of reorientates that scoring range all the time based on the purpose. So
right. I want high acidity. So this is an 8 in acidity because that's what they're after.
Exactly. And so while the range is maybe less adjustable in terms of its whole point movements, the spread of that is still, it actually can be a lot larger. And this is one of the interesting arguments of the CVA versus the 2004 form, is that historically the 2004 form, most coffees that we would be cupping and serving would be somewhere between 82 and 86 points. And yes, there are like little variations. Is it 82.75 or is it a 83.25? And that's great. It gives you some more definition or more resolution. But in this case, what you can have is actually wildly different scores based on how accurate it is to the purpose. And so again, that, a really bright Kenyan coffee, if you're after a bright, highly acidic, low body coffee, this could score this is an 8 or a 9 in terms of the value. And another coffee that is still bright and, but maybe is heavier bodied is going to score a 6, because within the focus and the range of what you're trying to hit, it's a little bit outside. It's like a good example that was kind of given to me, I think, is if we were cupping the top 10 coffees from Panama, best of Panama, right? And we're using the new form, the context of trying to select from the top 10 is now that 0 to 9 score. We know these are all amazing coffees. If something's just it's just amazing, but not freaking amazing, it's going to score a 6 or a 5, and the freaking amazing will score the 8, because our kind of window of assessment has shifted.
Right. So it's contextual to the situation, not
exactly.
just as a whole looking at coffee.
And so if you're looking for I want an entry level kind of chocolate nuts, heavy bodied coffee that's going to be great in milk, it shifts something that, historically those coffees might have been everywhere from like an 81 to an 82, and you've got like 10 coffees in that range. But now when we really narrow down our focus, we could actually be having quite a big spread between samples that were quite similar.
Yeah, right. That makes a bit of sense. A bit of sense. How's
Thanks.
that? It makes a lot of sense. That was
I'm
beautifully
Ben Bicknell.
explained.
I'm here to give a bit of sense.
The other thing he was talking about is implementation. So producers and cuppers were calibrated around the world with how to score coffee, right? It was everyone could kind of be on the same page. He feels that there was no major flaw with this kind of system, and the simple updates would have been more effective to kind of change it. The new form of calibration requires resources, expenses, trainings, and he's worried about the effect that's going to have on producers.
Look, I've heard that comment quite a few times, and I think honestly it's something that we're all still trying to figure out, is how we utilize what's called the effective scoring, or the effective assessment, which is the score component of this. How do we actually use that in, again, the trade? So buying and selling of the raw coffee product, because as he said, the existing system has had 20 years out there, and it's trickled out people kind of generally understand if you're cupping with someone in kind of Ethiopia and it's an 82 and you're cupping with someone in South Korea and it's an 86, there's alignment. Now, the new scoring system is really about alignment over the purpose, over what you're trying to achieve with the lot. And I think there is a lot of work to be done there, and it does require a lot of good communication across cultures. And so I think there's some reason to be maybe a little bit like questioning, how do we do that?
It's interesting the licensing for this deal is 10 years because you're like, it feels like it's going to take a long time to really get this flowing and working. I feel like we maybe need to put a timestamp on this and revisit it again in like, a year? Is that enough time?
Yeah.
And kind of be like, here's where we're at with the changes and what's happened so far.
I think that's a good idea.
What about people who were Q graders like yourself before and the new program? Because I just assumed you'd still be a Q grader, but it sounds like it's a very different kind of course of what you need to do. So do you have to do a full another course and become a Q grader again?
Yeah. So there's basically a time-bound transition that's happening here. And so the quick snapshot is that if you're an existing or actually someone who's a lapsed Q grader, so you haven't recertified, you can go through a 2-day workshop held it's a SCA workshop called CVA for Cuppers. So it's the new coffee value assessment, 2-day workshop. And when you pass that, you are transitioned into the new SCAQ program, right? So you'll have a license, a Q grader license for the next 3 years under the SCA. And you need to do that by the end of December 2025.
Okay.
So if you're existing or lapsed.
And if it's not that 2-day refresher course or whatever it is, what happens?
So if you don't do that, you need to basically retake the full new SCAQ. So whatever that looks like.
Is that more intensive than the previous?
We don't know yet. Not yet to be decided.
Well, I feel like it will be intense. So I'd do the 2-day if you have that opportunity. All right. Does that kind of cover off? I've taken a lot there. I feel like as a layman, can I kind of like summarize what I feel like I've learned and you tell me what's right and what's wrong?
Bring it in.
One thing that's kind of thrown me or that I wasn't really aware of is this idea of the new assessment being purpose-driven, right? Like almost like there's a brief of what you're looking for. Whereas before it felt like farms were just graded and you'd get a score just on a global kind of level of what's good and what's not. This is good, but also beyond it's good. We're going to tell you what it tastes like, but it's good for that. Now you're saying that this new one is purpose-driven and the scoring might change based on whether you want chocolatey or whether you want a bright fruity kind of coffee. Who is giving that purpose? Is that like the buyers of the coffee, like the importers or the roasters saying, I want this, then they get a score? Because if that's the case, has the role of the Q grader changed? Whereas before it was like, I'm just going to grade a farm. Now it's, I'm grading coffee based on what you're wanting.
Yeah, I think that the role of a Q grader does change a little bit with this. A lot of the skills are the same and the purpose of evaluating coffee is the same. But I think that they do need to create these new skills. And one I think that you've outlined there is critical is the ability to effectively describe a purpose or a brief. So say, this is what we want, and describe that in a way that someone on the other side of the world from a different culture can understand. And vice versa is for them to be able to interpret kind of a brief that's sent to them or a purpose that like, okay, we are looking for XYZ characteristics, and then to cup of coffee and compare it against and score it off that, right? So there's kind of two skills is like the interpretation and the writing of that purpose. I think is actually kind of a whole new skill set that hasn't been there.
Feels intense. I mean, if I'm to like think about, I kind of, with the simplicity, I kind of feel like I like the old model, and we haven't seen the new one, so I could be wrong as it comes out, but I kind of feel like I like it being like, just from a score level, here's a 85. And I'm like, great, I know what I'm looking at. And then I can brief myself and be like, I'm looking for these characteristics. Yes, that's what it has. That's what I'm going to be expecting from this coffee. I feel like that tells me, I feel like there's so much room for interpretation and missed messaging with this new system. I don't know if it's, how do you feel about it?
I feel a a little torn because, as you said, I like the idea of progress and reviewing this and refreshing it. It's a tool that hasn't been around for 20 years, and specialty coffee has definitely progressed in the last 2 decades. But yeah, I agree. I think I'm particularly concerned about making sure that the weight of this and the risk around it doesn't all land back on the producer side, because they already are shouldering an disproportionate amount of the requirement and the risk within the coffee trade. And so,
in a lot of cases, not making enough money for doing a lot of that shouldering.
Exactly. And, so the whole goal here is we need to focus on how do we make this effective communication if you are utilizing the CVA model. And I think that some of this friction and this challenge is what's probably why some people are still sticking with the 2004 cupping form and that system that they've utilized for so long.
Is the one thing that I did like that kind of I've talked about on the pod before. We spoke with common folk and talked about this, where it's like sometimes there needs to be value outside of the green coffee and the tasting notes, and you need to look at those outside factors. I think that is 100% true. And whatever way we look at the assessment, that should be added in for whatever value it adds and however you do it. Is this the way to do it? Maybe, maybe not. We're yet to see. But I do think that is a good progress in the way that we judge and evaluate coffee. Yeah.
And I also really am interested by this utilization from the world of sensory science of the hedonic scale, which, maybe has its challenges in technical trade communication. But from a consumer engagement point of view, the simple hand this over to someone and say, do you like this a little bit? Do you not like this a little bit? Do you like it a lot? It's simple language. It's approachable. It's easy for people to use. And I think as an industry, we need to kind of keep that in mind, is not overcomplicating or over complexifying. Is that even a word? Over complexifying.
I love over complexifying. Print it on a t-shirt.
The score that and talking about quality of coffee for a consumer. It's really when you hand it to your friend, they're like, oh yeah, I really like that, or it was okay. That's approachable.
Right. So congratulations on taking us through. That was a mouthful, and I think we did pretty well. I think as someone who didn't know too much about it, I kind of have a bit more of a grasp, but Good. I feel like there's still a lot more unanswered questions that we just don't know yet. And as I said, we'll do a check-in and kind of do that. But for the everyday coffee drinker or the barista out there or the people, I feel like we've learned a lot about talking about coffee and sensory skills and communicating about coffee. Let's say you don't want to become a Q grader. What are just things that people can do to better train their sensory skills when talking about coffee or when experiencing coffee?
Great question. I think there's a lot that you can do. There's some that are much more formal and structured, and some that are just a bit more relaxed and kind of being aware, right? I mean, I think tasting a lot of different things, not just coffee, but your sensory experience, just opening yourself up to new foods and beverages and paying attention to what are you tasting, what are you experiencing, and learning how people describe that, I think is great and delicious. So it's a good way to live life anyway.
Touching on that, what I did as I was younger and getting more into food, every time I'd cook with different spices, different whatever, I would individually taste each spice before putting it in. So I remember as a 19-year-old, crushed coriander seeds, just tasting that, actually not just following a recipe, tasting it. And I went, oh, that's the flavor in dukkha that that's the coriander seed. Yeah. Now I understand that's coriander. Now I understand. Too often it's just shake, 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 throw in whatever, a recipe says. When you really start just tasting individual items, it helps so much.
Yeah, yeah. And we often have that phrase of you can never recognize something you haven't experienced before.
Correct.
So if you've never tasted blueberries, you're not going to be able to ever say, oh, that's what that tastes like. So I think taste lots of different things, taste definitely a lot of different coffees, taste and especially cup coffees with other people, especially experienced people who do cupping a lot, and discuss it with them. Listen to how are they breaking it down, because you're going to add language to your descriptors. You're going to understand how they assess quality. So that's really great. There's some really good formal kind of and more structured training as well. You can get some really cool tools. There's the Lené du Café aroma kits, which have kind of a whole range of the most common coffee aromas. And that's a great way to train your your senses and attach it to a word. And then, of course, there'll be the new Q program. So keep your eyes open to see what that's like and whether it's a good pathway.
I think your point about cupping with people that know what they're talking about or have that is because, as you said, it's like once you've got that distinguishable feature or word in your head, it kind of starts to lock in once you do it a little bit. The other week, Liam was tasting a coffee and he was like, what is this kind of like, it's almost like, I don't want to say milky or whatever, you like lactic or, whatever it was. And he's like, yeah, that's what it is. Or like, okay, now I know that experience that I'm having is that word. So I think that's super important. I was going to say triangulation. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, triangulation's a kind of cool one of like having 3 cups of coffee, 2 are the same, 1 is different, and just kind of teaching yourself about to really notice the difference. As we said before, comparison is the easiest way to start really identifying difference.
That's a really fun way to structure it, and then helping people talk through like what are you tasting that's a difference? How are you using it to identify? Helps you really think about like, okay, where am I finding on my palate? What's activating here? Is it aftertaste? Is it acidity? Is it the body? Is it a particular flavor? And it helps you use that. But I think as well, like looking at the cupping form and, some of the protocols, and there is some, like a cupper's handbook that's published as well. They can be really great ways to just give you a framework to go like, where do I put my ideas?
Yeah, and every time you have a cup, you can sit there and be like, okay, let me think about aroma, let me think about acidity, let me think about sweetness, let me think about body. And so you can start identifying all those different elements.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that was a big one. That was great.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. We're going to touch base again and find out, how it starts to roll out, what the implications are in the industry, and we'll address it again. But I think that was a pretty great deep dive. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I guess I better say thank you because you're the guest today.
Yes, thank you.
As opposed to the co-host. For anyone else if you have any questions about this or want any feedback, obviously Ben is a wealth of knowledge as a Q grader. You're just getting some free love here. Make sure to reach out to us at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. Hit us on Instagram or the socials. It's Just Coffee Podcast on TikTok as well. Doing I didn't even realize the other day I saw on that, not huge numbers, but I was like, oh, we've got like 5,000 followers. That's pretty good.
Yeah, come along.
I reach out to us, especially about this topic. I think there's probably lots that we can discuss. Obviously, we had Simon reach out and share his thoughts on that, but we'll keep continuously chatting about it as it evolves over the coming year.
Yep, sounds good.
See you later.
Bye.